Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners and viewers, coast to coast, the Gulf to the 51st state. I just can't stop laughing when I say that. And it should be the 51st state. And around the globe. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on video channels everywhere. And of course, you can listen to the podcast on ontherightsideradio.com and catch all the great videos that we post along with every show, along with in-depth and detailed articles on the points that I bring up, which unfortunately I don't have time to cram into what I try and keep to a 30 or 35-minute presentation here. Anyway, this is our third Money, the Reality of Money series show. And we're going to review currency today. You should go back and listen to the last two shows. The first was general, to acquaint you with the various lingo when it comes to money. And last week was liquidity. Or should I say 4 or 5 days ago, was liquidity. And what liquidity means to money. And what that means to you and your pocketbook and your finances and your freedoms and your family. Today we're going to talk about currency. And I have a great quote. And believe it or not, this is from Vladimir Lenin, right? A devoted and avowed communist authoritarian. But sometimes, you can get some ideas, and you can certainly get an understanding from the other side. So this is very apropos to today's show, as you will see. So Vladimir Lenin. The way to destroy the capitalist system is to debauch the currency. By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate, secretly and unobserved, an important part of the wealth of their citizens. Unquote. Well, thank you, Vladimir. I think that we're all experiencing that right now. And of course, our buddy Barack Obama was right in the thick of it with his Cloward and Piven theory. You don't have to have a revolution to overthrow capitalism. You overburden it with entitlements. That's right. You print lots of money. You give it away to buy votes. And not only are you buying votes to stay in power, to continue the debauching of the currency, but the printing of the money creates more and more money, liquidity, money supply. And the more and more liquidity you have, the more and more dollars you have in the system, the less each one is worth. That's inflation. So you see, all good communists think alike, Barack and Lenin and the rest of them. Okay, let me give you a little rant story here before we kind of get going on this whole deal here. We got the road, as you know, we've been working on it for about a month. I mean, it was a mess. I didn't realize what a mess it was until we started working on it. There were some holes that had to be 9, 10 inches deep. I mean, teeth-chattering, bone-rattling stuff when you drove over them. We got those filled, if you remember, 3-4 weeks ago with big rock. That got packed in nicely thanks to a couple of unanticipated rains. And we've put in the next layer of gravel, which is kind of a medium-grade gravel. And we just started putting on the top coat, which is fine gravel. The smoother than a baby's behind driving surface. And we're about 80% done with this road work now. In fact, we're going to let it settle and then go out and finish it off. I think we should be able to finish it off in 2 to 4 hours, somewhere in there. And we've had both Bobcats working in the dump truck and the whole 9 yards. And, we're going to get this job done because we do it ourselves. We're going to get this job done, including the gravel and including the hauling of the gravel ourselves from the quarry, which is give or take 15 miles away, and including placing and smoothing and shoveling and raking and the whole 9 yards. We're going to get this done for roughly a quarter to a third of what it would have cost to bring in a contractor to do it. A contractor would have been $3,000 to $4,000. We're going to get it done for give or take $1,000. And you know, that is one of the nice things about running a ranch. There's all sorts of ways to save money if you are handy and have the equipment. And saving money doesn't have to do with not doing the work. Saving money has to do with doing the work in the most expeditious and logical manner. And I've been hunting, okay? You know that from the last show or two also. Right now, the score is elk 100 and reed, your cowboy's take, 0. So much for all the perceived advantages that people who don't hunt think hunters have over wild game animals, because they have every advantage. They know the land. They can smell you literally 5 miles away. They can see you miles away. In the case of some animals like white-tailed deer, they can hear a grain of sand. This is no kidding. They've done tests on it. Roll a grain of sand, roll at a quarter of a mile. So if you couple the hearing, the sensory perceptions, the hearing, the visual, and the olfactory of wild animals, they have every advantage. And then you throw in the mix that they know every tree and every leaf, and you do not. Yeah, it's not quite as easy as, should we say, the anti-hunters, the green vegans, like to make out. In any event, the season is not over, nor are the attempts in the season. But in any event, the hunt is a pleasurable experience. You are one with the land. You get on woods time. Did you ever notice that elk and deer and antelope and all those critters, they don't have watches. There is no time. Time stands still for them. However long it takes for them to wait out a threat, to get to where they're going for food or water or bedding, it doesn't matter. They have no watches. And you have to get on woods time to at least get partially the way to their level. And getting partially, at least, the way to their level is one of the keys in successful hunting and a full freezer. In any event, it's been fun. The hunting has been fun. The work on the ranch has been fun. Our winterization program is literally, we're going to put the plow on today before I go up the hill to see, to let the elk laugh at me some more. Oh, here comes that moron again. And we're going to get the plow on, get the chains on the dump truck now that it's done running gravel for the road. And we are ready for winter, or as ready as you can be for winter. We even got the solar fixed up today. It's been on the blink for a little bit. Unfortunately, it was not a difficult fix, although it was above my pay grade. So our electrician, who we allow to hunt in return for his unbelievably great services, came out and had the thing going in an hour and a half. It was great. All right, so enough of all that. By the way, there's going to be some great pictures along with the video today, both of the upper ranch, where we are unsuccessfully chasing elk, letting them laugh at us, and also of some of the final, well, close to final road work. So hope you enjoy them. Now let's talk about currency, right? We're talking about the reality of money. Well, currency is that paper stuff. You know, that bill you pull out of your wallet and at the top it says Federal Reserve note, a promise to pay you $1. Oh, cool. And where are they going to get that? Oh, I guess they're going to print it up. They'll print you up another Federal Reserve note to replace the one in your pants pocket or in your purse if you're a gal. Currency, folks, is the means of exchange that people have some trust in and that people accept in return for giving value. In other words, I give you $1 and you give me a pack of gum. Actually, a pack of gum now is about $1.70. So I give you $1.70 and you give me a pack of gum. I gave you currency. You trust, kind of, that currency. You trust it in that you can take it and you can go out and give it to somebody who's going to give you something of value. And you give me my pack of gum. I mean, it's really that simple. And there's many complicated tangents to currency, but I'm trying to really fly at 30,000 feet here because it's really important that you get the basics. If you get the basics, you can dig as deep as you want with the videos and with the stories and with the links that we have on the website, ontherightsideradio.com, or you can do your own research. But if you get the basics, you'll get the basics of what is going on and what the dangers are, and hopefully what you can do to lessen the risk, the current risk, to you, your family, your property, your wealth, and your future and your freedoms. So currencies, every country has their currencies. And then, of course, you have the EU. Woohoo, the EU. And, you know, I'm going to segue a little bit from that into some rat-a-tat-tat for you. But we're going to stick on this currency thing to set the foundation, and then after rat-a-tat-tat, come back and wrap up the currency. Not that it's not wrapping itself up right now, as we all know. All right. When each country has a currency, each currency is worth a different thing to that country versus other countries. And that's called the basket of currencies. The Chinese yuan, or renminbi, as they like to call it. The US dollar, the British pound sterling, the European Union euro. Each of the countries in the European Union has their own currency, Spain and Italy, and you name it. You know, the lira and the franc and all sorts of things. But currencies are weighted against one another to determine their relative value. So when you hear the dollars going up or the dollars going down, that is not the dollar going up or down all on its own. That's the dollar going up or down relative to the basket of currencies. And the dollar will behave differently up or down relative to individual currencies. Let me pause right there in our discussion on currencies. Give you a little rat-a-tat-tat because it kind of ties in, if you will. Rat-a-tat-tat number one, did you know that the European Union, and listen to my shows a couple weeks ago on the history of the European Union and its dissolution, it's dissolving, it's melting before our eyes. The European Union is so fixed on trying to have a conflict with Russia, and I hope you folks listened to that video that I had on this show, I think it was last week, the Gardner video. I mean, it's just hilarious. You know, it's about Europe taking on Russia. It's great. But they're so hell-bent on conflict with Russia, which is really about the European Union trying to maintain its globalist grip on power, and the individual heads of state in the woke governments of Britain, Germany, France, etc., trying to hold on to their power, than it is about any real threat from Russia. This is just the false flag that they're waving to try and get Europeans excited about a conflict with Russia, and Russia will kick their ass. I mean, it's not even a contest, folks. I mean, it's just not even a contest. I mean, Russia has the money, they have the economy, they have the war footing, they have the factories, they have the manufacturing, they have the ammunition. They have the best land-based army in both continents. And the European Union has a unwilling population, leaders that have 13 to 15% approval rates, virtually no munitions. They're broke. I mean, it's not even a contest. But they are so hell-bent on trying to create conflict that they are creating conflict within the European Union. Because there's a number of countries now, 8, in fact, of the 28, I guess 33, now that some of the Norwegian, the Scandinavian countries have joined. There's a number of countries that are saying no. And remember, one country can veto things, matters of security in the European Union. Not matters of economy, but matters of security and governance. And the biggest thorn in, or the biggest 3 thorns in the European Union buttocks is Romania, Slovakia, and particularly Hungary, Viktor Orban, who I think is terrific. And they're saying, no, we're not going to have any war with Russia. We're not going to participate. We want nothing to do with it. And it just so happens that there's refineries in Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary, and several other countries that refine Russian petro products. And, you know, the European Union, which is energy starved and industrially kaput, they're trying to stop all oil trade with Russia, to their own detriment, I might add. It just so happens that last week, and you didn't hear a thing about this, on mainstream news. Nothing. In fact, you barely heard about it in Europe. But simultaneously, literally like the same day, there were big explosions at the refinery that processes Russian crude oil in Romania, and in Slovakia, and in Hungary. Must have been like a 3-pronged lightning bolt struck by the hands of God. What do you think? Or do you think it was just sabotage? We already know the EU sabotages elections. No reason they can't sabotage their own member states' infrastructure, right? To achieve their end, which is to stay in power, folks. To stay in the corrupt power thrones that they occupy. Along those economic lines, by the way, First Brands, Prima Lending, and Tricolor are all what they call private equity lenders. They are all subprime vehicle lenders in the United States. And all of them, over the last 2 weeks, have gone bankrupt. Total losses are estimated at $400 billion between stock and defaulted loans and all sorts of things. And it's a big mess, okay? And of course, subprime auto loans have gone wildly delinquent, which caused these defaults. Even the mighty J.P. Morgan, right? J.P. Morgan Trust, largest bank, even they are taking, and probably it's going to be more, $170 million hit. Unfortunately, there's some regional banks taking big hits like that too. They can't withstand them quite the way J.P. Morgan can. So be looking for a potential, why don't we call this the canary in the coal mine on a potential credit crisis. Okay, 5 million people, supposedly, according to mainstream media, participated in the No Kings protest. You know, it was hilarious watching interviews of these people. The reporters would ask them, well, why are you out here protesting? And the response would be, well, we have to stop what Trump is doing. I don't like what Trump is doing. Or I don't like what the Republicans are doing, or whatever, you know, the same type of answer. And when pressed by the reporter saying, well, give me 3 things that Trump or the Republicans or whoever is doing that you don't like, not one of them could say anything. I think one managed to stumble out, well, I don't like him deporting, families and young children. Oh, how about terrorists and criminals? And and illegal aliens who are not children. But that's besides the point. The point is, these morons don't even know. They're useful idiots, as our buddy Lenin called them. They're just useful idiots. And they're out there marching, creating a storm, financed by Soros, of course, and Red China, who loves to foment dissent and discord in the United States, along with Russia. And they don't even know what they're out there for. They're just out there having a good time, I guess, and being their woke little selves. But what's really interesting is that when you pan these crowds, and there have been several articles on it, which I'm not the only person who noticed it, the huge majority of these quote-unquote crowds in these protests, including in the metropolitan areas, were, guess what? Like middle-aged to older white people. Really, middle-aged to older white people. They were out there marching. I guess they're reliving their 1960s anti-Vietnam Berkeley experience or something. I found that remarkable. It wasn't a bunch of young people. It wasn't a bunch of multicolored, multiracial people. It was primarily white, middle-aged, older people. Some of them, apparently the way they were dressed and their jewelry and all that kind of stuff in the interview they couldn't conduct or they wouldn't respond to, not destitute at all. Quite interesting. Quite interesting. Pritzker, the absolute scumbag governor of Illinois. I mean, Illinois, really. I think you can do better than that. And Nancy Pelosi, she needs no introduction. They are now, the newest thing on the left is threatening ICE agents generally with, when we come back to power, you're going to be prosecuted for your immigration war crimes or, whatever nonsense they dream up. Think about the chilling effect that has on the functioning of the United States government in any respect. Oh, does that mean that the next guys that come to power can prosecute the little guy out there doing his job, the cop, the FBI agent, the Secret Service guy, the ICE agent? I mean, what is this? Now, it's one thing if they do something treasonous and egregious, as a few FBI agents did in Russiagate, or something quite suspect, as some Secret Service agents did during the two attempts on Trump's life. I mean, those kind of things, that's one thing. But to threaten somebody for simply doing their job, which is ensconced, as you can imagine, in the federal handbook, as to what your job is, pages and pages and pages and pages, to threaten these people is not only cowardly, it is, in my mind, treason. That's my take, the Cowboys' take. And the last little thing on rat-a-tat-tat before we get back to currency, which I think I've set up for you now. I got a call from a friend, and they live south of here, down toward the metropolitan areas, down there around Colorado. And they told me that they went into Albertsons, big food chain out in this neck of the woods, and they were shocked to find signs in the self-checkout counters that said, because pennies are no longer being, I want you to really think about this, because pennies are no longer being manufactured, we can no longer count pennies as change. And therefore, we will be rounding up to the nearest nickel. In other words, if you buy a head of lettuce for $1.51, the self-checkout counter is going to ring that up as $1.55. Now, that may not sound like much, 4 cents on a head of lettuce. But if you think about it, folks, it's give or take 3% that was just tacked on to that little grocery item in your bin. So, putting aside that there's still 1.5 billion estimated pennies in circulation, there's still lots of pennies, folks. They haven't gone away. And putting aside that it's just this year that they're no longer minting them, I think this is demonstrative of what you can expect in the future as companies try and dig their way out of a faltering economy with all sorts of gimmicks and games. Let me know in the comment section if you've seen anything similar in other department stores or food stores or any type of retail outlet. I'm really interested in this. I was shocked to hear it, actually. All right, back to currencies. We've now identified currencies here in the first part of the show. That is the quote-unquote money. It's not money. It's fiat paper. The fiat paper that your country issues. Whatever country you are listening to me in. I know people listen to me over in Europe. I know people in Canada do, people in Israel, other places, I'm sure. But your currency is your currency. And how your currency fares, just like in our case, the United States dollar, fares against other currencies is its index. Once again, keep this really simple. Generally, if your currency is going down in relative value in the index, in other words, it's becoming worth less in terms of other currencies, that creates kind of a boom for your exports to other countries because they can buy your goods cheaper because they convert their currencies to your currencies to buy your goods. So they get more goods for your currency buck or whatever its denomination is, lira, franc, peso, doesn't matter. Conversely, if your dollar or your lira or your franc or your peso or your yuan is going up relative to other currencies, it is not good for exports because people have to pay more, but it is good for you because a unit of currency buys more things of value. And when I say a unit of currency, that fiat $1 Federal Reserve promise to pay, the Federal Reserve note that you have in your pocket, it will buy more if the ratio is, like right now, close to 100 relative to a ratio of 80, which is a lower value for your currency relative to the basket of currencies. The US dollar got to a high of about 120. It hovered around 109 to 113 for a while here not too long ago, a very high value. And it's now just below 100. And they say going up. Don't know. But one of the things that you need to understand is manipulations of currency. You've heard Trump scream about China manipulating its currency, etc. And by the way, it happens all the time by countries, old, new, large, small, doesn't matter what continent, because it has those effects I was telling you about. Higher helps your people buy more, lower helps the country export more. I'm making it very simple. But one of the things that currency valuations or manipulations do is it ties into inflation. So if you have a lower valued currency, you generally have more inflation. It takes more units of your currency, your fiat paper, to buy something of value. And of course, if it gets too low, people don't trust it and they won't even accept it as a store of value, and you can't buy anything with it. And that's happened many times in history, folks, many times in history, recent history. And if it goes up, well, that also impacts inflation adversely. Because as your currency unit goes up, yes, you can, for a while, buy more with it, quote unquote, more things of value. But eventually, those things of value that you're buying will expand to meet the void. In other words, work expands to meet the void, currencies expand to meet the void. So an unstable currency that's going up or going down or vacillating back and forth does not make for price stability. Okay? Unstable currencies are the antithesis of price stability. And the antithesis of price stability is, for the most part, inflationary. There can be exceptions to the rule. Now, I've talked very generally about currencies, but one of the things which stabilizes a currency is backing, something that backs that currency. And as you know from my previous shows, and I'm sure stuff you've heard around, the BRICS countries, right now there's, I think, 21 of them, and more wanting to join, and includes China, Russia, India, South Africa, and Brazil, BRICS. Those countries are moving helter-skelter, hell-bent on buying gold, as are most of the central banks around the world, other than Canada, that the only country in the whole world, I believe, that has zero gold in its reserves. Good luck, Canada. By the way, what is the result of a socialist government in Canada? Horrible business orientation, anti-natural resource, which is really their only saving grace. It's what they should be focusing on. Should we say suspect elections? And of course, 10 years of Trudeau, which is more than any country could probably take. Well, the Canadian dollar, the Canadian loonie as it's called, has gone down 20%, give or take, relative to the United States dollar just in the last month. And they expect it to go down another 20%. As an aside, there's lots of speculators out there in the futures and the currency markets that literally bet that this currency is going to go down relative to this currency. I mean, it's another way to make money. It's like betting on the horse races, right? A little bit more scientific, but not much. So you have this currency phenomena occurring. Now, one of the interesting things is, thinking back to last week's show, the money supply, liquidity, what do you think happens to the dollar? We'll talk just the United States for right now, but it's true of any currency. What do you think happens to the dollar if they print a whole bunch of dollars? Well, each dollar is worth less. And what do you think happens to the dollar relative to the basket of currencies? That's right. It goes down in its ratio of value to the other currencies. And what happens when it goes down? Well, that's right, inflation. That's right. Albertson, tacking on 4 cents to your head of lettuce because we don't have any pennies for change. This brings us back to Lenin's quote, right? Lenin's quote is so apropos here. Debauch the currency of the capitalists, create inflation, and watch them tumble over. Think about that. Now, how do you protect yourself against, quote unquote, the printing, that is the digital flick of a button, of liquidity, the creation of liquidity and money supply, as we talked about last week, coupled with the debauching, as Lenin would say, the debasing, as we say in economic terms today, of the currency, of your fiat paper, your promise of the Federal Reserve to pay you $1, maybe, if they feel like it, and they have it. And they won't feel like it, and they won't have it, so much for that. hard assets. This is why the BRICS are putting together, are stockpiling hundreds and hundreds, thousands of tons of gold. Tons of gold, not an ounce, tons. And they've been on a wild buying spree really for the last 10 years, but really accelerating after Biden, Obama's third term, stole $300 billion of treasury notes, which Russia was holding as reserves. For obvious reasons, right? I mean, who is going to own something that they think the other guy can and will take, which is all we demonstrated to the world in 2022. And I think intentionally. I think it was done intentionally to destabilize trust in the United States dollar. And I've given you the quotes from Obama's head of economic people from 2014 and 2024. It's time for King Dollar to be dethroned. I mean, that's a direct quote from his inner economic circle. What better way to do it than to take steps that are lunacy so that the world distrusts your dollar? There's another thing, by the way. It's called Trippin's Dilemma. Trippin's Dilemma is when you are the reserve currency, you can't help but have a stronger currency than most other currencies, which has all the impacts, the negative impacts that we discussed here earlier in this show. And one of the things that many economists theorize is that Bessens, however you want to pronounce his name, our Treasury Secretary, and Trump are really trying to get the United States they don't want the dollar to not be important. They want it to be important, and the dollar is still very important to world trade, although less so as time goes on. But they don't want the dollar to really be the quote-unquote reserve currency anymore. Because reserve currency means Trippin's Dilemma comes into play, which is the reserve currency is really by de facto default the strongest, or as a lot of economists like to say right now, such a cliche, the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry basket. But that's not good for what Trump is trying to do, which is to retool America, reindustrialize America, and shape America back into an exporter rather than an importer of goods. In other words, build it, sell it, ship it, rather than don't build it, import it, pay for it. So when you have all these conflicting thoughts, there's another theory out there, by the way. It's called the milkshake theory. Brent Johnson. In fact, we have a video on the website from Brent himself explaining his thoughts. And the dollar milkshake theory is basically that the dollar, no matter what these other countries try and do, no matter what nonsense is going on in this country, the dollar is still going to be the preeminent, maybe not the reserve, but the preeminent currency for trade in the world, and that any deficits in trade will be settled in gold, which is kind of what the BRICS are setting up. In other words, China can give yuan, to Russia for oil, and Russia can give rubles to China for breadsticks or, wonton soup or whatever they're buying. And there'll be a difference, right? The wonton soup might be worth X less than the oil. And that is settled in gold. That's what Project Enbridge, which I've told you about, and what the BRICS countries are setting up. And to be able to settle those trade imbalances between them in gold, that is something of a hard asset, the Chinese are setting up vaults around the world. I think they have 3 or 4 set up right now, but they plan to have them in scores of countries. So that basically the gold is local. And when you want to settle your trade imbalance with country XYZ, you can go down to the vault, get your gold. So there's lots of things going on, but all of them point to one thing, folks, and that is to protect your wealth, protect your assets, avoid wherever your currency in whatever country you're in is headed. And if it's a fiat currency, it's not headed to the moon, it's headed down, maybe down for the count. You need hard assets. Now, the central banks choose gold. They're pretty smart people. They got lots of researchers. They must know something. Other outfits and some of the central banks choose silver. And other outfits choose other commodities. They could be rare earths. It could be uranium. Who knows what? I've often said that if the United States wanted to correct its balance sheet and eliminate its debt, you revalue, assuming we have it, the gold that the United States owns to 10,000 an ounce, 15,000 an ounce, whatever the numbers are, it's just math, plus a percentage, a third, let's say, of our natural gas reserves, because we are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas on the planet. And natural gas is an extremely critical and becoming more critical fossil fuel. So the United States could kind of balance its accounts with a combo move like that. And the other countries probably would welcome a revaluation of gold, because just think about it. If you're China, and listen, China says they have 2,300 ounces, 2,300 tons of gold. Try 30,000 at least. And that doesn't include the gold that's held by the population, which is probably double that. But if you revalued gold, think of the wealth that would create for China. And China has a lot of the same problems we do. They're printing money like crazy, money supply is going wild. They have a deflation going, and that has to do with their absolutely disastrous property market and a whole host of other things that we're not going to get into in this show. But all the countries of the world, bar none, would benefit. Probably the least impact would be to the Swiss, who have one of the most stable currencies in the world, the Swiss franc. In any event, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole on all this, but if you want to protect what you have, folks, if you want to protect your purchasing power in any currency or without a currency, which is also a possibility, the fiat world is on its way out. When it's going to hit rock bottom, we don't know, but fiat currencies have never, in the history of man, 5,000 years recorded history of man, survived. Not one, not a single solitary one. So, the writing's on the wall for all the fiat currencies of the world, including the United States dollar. It's just a question of how quickly, when, and how violent its demise. And while it's going down, or while it's having its problems, fueled by liquidity, money supply, currency valuations, currency manipulations that we've now discussed, the things which will hold value are things which cannot be duplicated, things which are scarce. I personally like land, obviously. I'm a rancher. We have land, and land is something that cannot be, why don't we say, each parcel of land is wholly separate and distinct from every other parcel, and it can never be duplicated or recreated. It's scarce. Other people like gold. Other people like silver. Maybe it's a combination of all those things. I will warn all of you that if you decide on precious metals or you're in precious metals, to safeguard your wealth and safeguard against dollar or currency degradation, that you not keep it on your premises, that you not keep it on your land, that you keep it in some safe place, hopefully outside the central banking system, because that's another can of worms. You know, desperate governments do desperate things. And perhaps it's, investment in your business, because your business is more or less recession proof. Remember that when things get really tough, fiat currencies are wobbly. Credit crises, like I talked about in the rat-a-tat-tat, start to loom their ugly heads. Geopolitical conflict, which there's no shortage of around the globe, begin to really bubble over. What you don't want to have is something which can be duplicated quickly. Oh, you mean like printing dollars, printing fiat currency, flicking a switch and creating $1 trillion overnight? Something which can be created easily or recreated easily or duplicated easily. You want something which cannot. I know some of you listening to this show like art, and you have art collections, and that's terrific. And some of you have car collections. You like older cars, muscle cars, old trucks, whatever it happens to be. And others collect other things that they perceive to have value, right? That can bring in whatever the medium of exchange is if you ever want to sell it. And I'm not playing up or down. Gold, silver, uranium, rare earths, art, old trucks. I mean, whatever is your stick is your stick. But everybody needs to have a stick or a combination of sticks. Maybe a little art and a little precious metals and a little land, or in my case, a pretty good chunk of land and very little of the other stuff. And in some people's case that I know, a pretty good chunk of everything. I mean, it all depends on your financial resources too. But something that if you have not embarked on yet, and we're going to finish up this Money is Reality series with the next show, where we're going to talk about the deliberate steps that are being taken to degrade this currency, to create inflation, to steal from you. Lenin warned you. He warned you. So did Obama. To steal from you your wealth and guise it as something else, and to protect yourself from the decline of all fiat currencies. And they are all in decline. Some in very significant decline, others just in moderate and worrisome decline. None in, oh yeah, no big deal. So you want to think about this. And if you have not begun to put together, remember, in bad times, folks, it is not important to have what people want. It is important to have what people need. Let me give you some ideas. Possible barter, in other words, what people will perceive to have value. And their medium of exchange, if fiat currency collapses at some point, not if, when it collapses at some point in the future, might be food. Maybe they're a farmer and they're growing food. And maybe they need sockets for their tools. Good trade fodder. Or maybe they need ammo for their guns. Good trade fodder. Think about what people need, not what they want. And what people need is where you should we say, create protection for yourself. Have some of what people need that's easy for you to obtain on hand. You might find it comes in very, very handy at some point in the future. And my personal opinion, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think it's going to be the very distant future. So give this all some thought. I'm bringing you this series for a reason. It's not just to acquaint you with the reality of money, okay? Because, folks, fiat currency is not money. Gold is money. Silver is money. Land is money. In certain situations, bullets will be money. In other situations, food will be money. You understand what I'm saying? Think about this. If you have not embarked on a plan to protect yourself in the event or when the events occur, do so. Doesn't take much. For a couple $100, you can buy ammo. 10 boxes of 22 shells might be worth a lot in the future. An extra set of hand tools might be incredibly valuable in the future. Think about it. And next week, or the next show, hopefully well before a week has elapsed, the next show I'm going to talk about the last part of the reality of money, and that is who really pulls the strings on money and why they do it. And we're going to talk more about what you can do to protect yourself from those people who are evil and what they're doing and what they're planning, which is evil. And what you can do really no matter what your financial situation. And hopefully I'll have some additional and good suggestions for you. I want to remind you about the elections coming up in just a week. The New Jersey gubernatorial election, the New York gubernatorial election, the friggin' New York City mayoral election. You talk about a communist. He would have made Lenin blush, this Zoran character. Unbelievable. And the Democratic Party endorsed him, which tells you that the Democratic Party is not, as I have told you many times, the Democratic Party. It is the Communist Party. On the website, we now have our election buttons up. Click on that. Send $10 to our candidates in these races. These elections are only a week away, folks. And then when these elections are over, and hopefully we'll be successful, oh, and the Virginia gubernatorial election, Winsome Earl. These are really important. Really important. And when these are done, we're going to turn our focus and our sights on the midterms. Because believe it or not, just 2 weeks from now, they are only a year away. And these midterms are really, really, really consequential. And it all ties back to the reality of money, okay, and your freedoms. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. Thanks for listening. Keep the wind at your back. We'll talk to you shortly.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.